Who would have thought that such a multi-layered story could be crafted without a single word of dialogue? A story that raises questions about the nature of the human mind as well as where we, as a society, are headed. After playing Inside, I found myself surprised that nobody has really attempted this before because it just makes so much sense. Think about it. Multi-layered stories can be crafted in such a way that scholars analyze them for decades, but the analysis can only go as far as the author permits. What makes Inside unique is that without dialogue, there are bottomless gaps that pop up in the narrative, and we must use our imagination to fill in those gaps. And unlike the limits set by an author, our imagination is infinite. Because of this choice in narrative, the theories that have germinated online these past couple of weeks have been fascinating. Seeing where people's minds go to try and justify their perspective is almost as fascinating to me as the existence of bubbles to a newborn baby. Now, there might be a couple of you saying, well, it's pretty obvious what the story of Inside is about. It's about mind control in an Orwellian dystopia. Yes, that's the basic foundation the story sets itself upon, but the heights, or depths, the story goes to when you consider specific elements of the game are, like I said, infinite. Today what I'm going to do is take everything I've read online and compile them into one big super theory that tries to explain as much as possible about the world and story of Inside. Due to the nature of the game, there's bound to be lots of disagreement, so I encourage you to take to the comments at any time and prove me wrong. And of course, there are massive spoilers ahead. So as I previously mentioned, the basic plot of this game seems easy enough to understand. You are in a dystopian world where a fascistic organization is rounding up the populace and transferring them to a facility where they can be a part of their evil mind control experiments. The imagery chosen conjures up images of Nazi Germany when the Jewish population was rounded together and sent off to concentration camps. The ultimate goal of all this seems to have been the creation of that giant school cafeteria meatball we see at the end. There is the obvious explanation that the meatball was a hive mind used by the organization to extend their control, and then the meatball went rampant and escaped its prison by the end. However, there are certain holes and visual cues that cause myself as well as many other players to feel a bit hollow. There were too many things that weren't given a direct explanation. What were those long-haired monsters trying to suffocate you during the underwater sequences? What were those pods with the glowing light that we saw in the forest? What is with that diorama? To try and answer all these questions, let's start from the beginning. So, this unknown red-shirted kid appears from off-screen and starts running through the forest much like the beginning of Limbo. The first thing we happen upon is a truck containing a bunch of people as well as these hatch-looking things. The first thing you ask yourself is, what is inside of them? Well, if you play on to a point later in the game, you notice a part where there are 3 drones occupying one of these hatches, suggesting the device's purpose. What you will also notice is that these hatches, when they are turned on and have a light shining through the window, tend to exclusively appear in a forest, or at least where greenery is present. Yes, they appear in the facility as well, but they are only turned on in a non-industrial setting. There are a couple of theories that have sprung up online suggesting that the drones are grown inside these hatches and then shipped off to the facility where they can be relegated to their various jobs. Otherwise, how would the organization manage to round up a truckload of people out in the middle of nowhere in a post-apocalyptic world that seems to be suffering from some sort of population crisis? Speaking of which, notice how in the opening sections of the game everything is completely deserted? There are cars that have been absorbed into the earth. Everything seems to be in complete decay, and it seems the world has been this way for a long time. Maybe the reason why these drones are being created is because there is some sort of population crisis, and there are not enough people around to maintain a healthy economy or a pleasant aesthetic for their city. So, there had to be an organization that would resort to barbaric, unethical means to maintain some semblance of social order. In order to desensitize the coming generation to this reality, the parents that still exist felt it would be helpful to bring their kids on a trip to this facility to see how everything functions. It's horrifying and uncomfortable, but it's the way things have to be. Moving along through the game, you'll notice that there is a lot of water. Playing through the game, I asked myself why so much of the facility is underwater, and why does that portion of the facility look so dilapidated? If this place is run by the guys trying to maintain order, they're sure not doing a good job regulating themselves. The most obvious explanation is that some sort of post-apocalyptic event caused the bottom to flood, but that just doesn't satisfy me. After all, there is use of water in more controlled environments throughout the game. I believe the explanation for all this lies in those freaky-looking naked baby mannequin things. I believe that these things were failed attempts at creating a hive mind. I believe the facility tried to suspend them in water and experiment on them until they went rampant and destroyed the place, hence such a large portion of the facility being destroyed as well as underwater. On top of this, I believe that these creatures are an extension of the will of the hive mind. Think about it. The last creature you encounter attaches you to a plug that gives you the ability to swim underwater as well as order drones around without the need of a helmet. Now you might be saying, but what about the other creatures before that one? It seems like they're trying to drown you. Is that the will of the hive mind? I believe that the ones trying to drown the boy were just displaced due to the flooding and destruction below. You can view these creatures much like the drones, as cogs in a much larger machine. If displaced, they're like watering cans in a desert. These creatures' sole purpose was to aid the boy on his journey to the hive mind. But wait a minute, wouldn't that imply that there was some anticipation that the boy would come? Exactly. There is an alternate ending to this game that you can attain after you find all those glowing orbs. If you remember the cornfield section at the beginning of the game, there is a secret passageway that you can access that will bring you to an underground bunker. There you will see a helmet hooked up to computers as well as a hidden power cable. If the boy unplugs this power cable, what happens? He assumes the position of the drones, implying that he is being controlled by something as well. But what? Well, what if it's the meatball? What if the meatball has gained enough self-awareness to control the consciousness of a boy under his network of control, and guide him into the facility so that the boy may free it? But if that's true, why would there be an alternate ending where the boy unplugs himself? How would that be the will of the hive mind? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. What's even creepier than this, however, is the fact that there is evidence to suggest that the facility anticipated the boy's arrival as well as the hive mind's escape. The least obvious example is that there are people in vans searching for the boy, even though it isn't suggested that the boy was drawing attention to himself prior to his first appearance in the woods. What if the facility anticipated this because the boy going rogue would show up as an anomaly in their network? It would make sense seeing the boy is most likely a drone as well, so they would have to go out and search for him in a place that seems pretty much devoid of any other human beings expressing free will. Also, isn't it kind of weird that there was this audience of people towards the end, sitting in a theater with a giant hole in the floor and bait ready to go? But the most obvious example that a lot of people miss is the diorama you see during the breakout sequence. It is an exact replica of the meatball's final resting place. Most people will overlook this part, and when they get to the ending, they'll feel a sense of relief that this oppressed little ball is now free, bathing under those holy rays of light that are somehow resting in the same place as that diorama. Hold up. Natural light doesn't work like that. Unless the facility anticipated this happening, and the false sense of security some people have felt from this ending is just another form of the facility's control. So, finally, with all of this information in mind, we ask ourselves what the purpose of all this is. The answer lies in the alternate ending. I believe that the whole game is a controlled experiment by the facility. Everything from the beginning in the forest to the end under the light. The whole purpose of this experiment is to create a hive mind that will draw the strongest of the remaining human population to it, so it can grow and become even more controlling, even if it results in devastation and destruction. The facility will continue to repeat this experiment in perpetuity until the end of time, unless a hive mind realizes, much like Joshua did in War Games, that the only winning move in this struggle for control is not to play, which, eventually, it does.